Welcome to another episode of Shift with Elena Agar. In this conversation, I'm joined once again by Millree Williams. He was on a podcast about a year ago, and I wanted to bring him back because he is a career coach, but he's also a retirement coach. And with a lot of things that are happening these days in terms of just, one, we have a lot of baby boomers that are over the age of 65 in the US in particular that are looking at retirement. And two, we had a lot of different changes in the government that kind of, in some cases forced people to retire, in some cases got people to think about earlier retirement. And I think it's an important topic that we don't often think about in our careers because as young people, young professionals, we're thinking, we don't think about what's going to happen 20, 30 years from now. And it takes an emotional toll if you're not prepared to take that retirement. It's not just about the financials. So I really wanted to have this conversation with Millree as he works with a lot of people that are kind of 40 plus and who might be looking at early retirement, who might be just, looking at retiring and starting a new career potentially, or just doing something different. And I think collectively, we should just think about what's next, right? And prepare for it from all different sides. So tune into this conversation. As always, please share, like, subscribe, and come back for more. Millree, welcome back to the Shift podcast.
Mhm. Thank you, Elena. I'm really happy to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. I'm always happy to chat with you. Always doing interesting things that are relevant. You're doing a lot of things. I always get your newsletter with the 40 plus group, and I see you doing a lot of great events. And I think it's adding a lot of value to people who are in the market, who are kind of impacted by different things that are happening, not only now, but just in general. I think
Hmm.
careers is always up in the air these days. I
Hmm.
think, no matter which age group you're in, you're going through turbulence. But I think particular
Yes.
group that we're kind of seeing being impacted a lot is a lot of the senior professionals in terms of just their levels and also seniority in their age and so
Hmm.
on. So
Yeah.
and that's kind of what I want to dive into today because I think there's been a lot of conversations around early retirements and
Hmm.
a lot of things that are happening that are kind of pushing people in certain directions. So
Hmm.
let's kick it off here and just like give me your thoughts. What are you seeing? Because you work with a lot of those 40 plus group
Yeah.
and a lot of people who are actually thinking about retirement. So what are
Yeah.
you seeing right now in the market? What's happening?
Yeah. Especially in terms of my work with 40 plus, we're seeing a lot of people who are getting pushed out of the market, out of the job market, for all kinds of reasons, whether they're in federal service or whether they're in nonprofits that support federal service. And they're just kind of, many of them are at that age where they're just trying to figure out kind of what's next. And they're just trying to figure out, and how can I position myself to still be competitive and vibrant and kind of live the life I want to live. And it's very challenging because the marketplace, the job marketplace, and the career marketplace, they're just so transient, and there's so many big shifts going on right now.
Hmm.
So how do people who are 40, 50, 60 years old think about that? And for many of them, I have to say, they're really spending a lot of time thinking about, how do I actually create my next chapter? What is that next chapter going to look like for me? And it could be early retirement, it could be forced retirement, it could be that they're at a point in their lives where they're just thinking, okay, it's time for me to just start thinking about what's next. And so, in addition to, the possibility of shifting careers.
Hmm.
So, as a career coach, a career transition coach, and as a retirement coach, I spend a lot of time talking with people who are pondering those kinds of questions.
What's been the biggest challenge, I guess, that you've seen with people who are, maybe either pushed in that retirement? Like what are they more like if you look at like the different people that you speak with in your world of kind of
Mhm.
career, retirement, career coaching, what is that or retirement coaching, I guess, not a career coaching, but what like percentage wise, like are people wanting to stay in the market and say like I'm not ready to retire, or are they kind of traditionally retiring but then they're doing like other things that are more aligned with around hobbies, around some other things, maybe starting businesses, starting consultancies? Like does that count? That doesn't count as retirement, right?
Well, it can be retirement. Sometimes people base it on whether or not they're receiving Social Security benefits.
Mm,
That can be a marker. But I would say that most people, if you start thinking about 65 as a point, as a benchmark, lots of people are thinking about how do how do I approach retirement? And it can be gig work if they're not ready to retire. So much of who they are is maybe aligned, so much of their identity is aligned to work. It could be, this is really a great time for me to sort of rediscover myself, or I put so much of my life into my family, into work, that now is the time for me to really think about how I want to really reconnect with my family. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a lot of that going on. But don't make the mistake of thinking that retirement is just at 65 or 60, 66. There are people who are in their 40s and 50s who have created a sound financial plan, who are just thinking, okay, maybe it's time for me to just do something else. And that something else might have nothing to do with a career. It just might be other kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't deal with I don't spend a whole bunch of time working on um, retirement financial planning. That's not my jam. I'm really much
Mm-hmm.
more focused on what is the lifestyle you want to create and how do you manifest that?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I see this with a lot of kind of people in my life that I've come across that are in those, if we talk about people that are in their 60s, for example. I
Hmm.
had a client one time, actually, she was 60. I want to say, or something like that, 65, 66. And she, during the time that I was working with her, she actually ended up deciding to retire. And one of her biggest fears was, that the loss of kind of like purpose, because
Hmm.
it's like you are this, whatever, pick a title, you are this, and you've been doing this, and
Hmm.
obviously, your kids are grown, and maybe you have grandkids, but depending on how close they are to you, so there's this emptiness that kind of, embarks on a person. That's at least that's what she was telling me, and she was like, automatically, that was her biggest concern. It wasn't about money, like, to your point, like, she was very
Hmm.
financially well off, she was
Hmm.
fine. It was just more of like, what do I do with my day? Because we
Purpose.
know this, I think, like, yeah, like, standard wise, the minute you stop doing is the minute you start dying. Meaning that, like, if you don't have something to fulfill you and you just kind of at home, I mean, we know this, the loneliness, is really high in people who are in the retirement age if they don't have that family around them, and
Mhm.
because they lose that sense of purpose. So I guess that's probably a scary. I mean, it's scary for me to even think about it. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you have to really sort of, I encourage people to think about their lives as just a great novel. You know, what are those chapters in their lives and how do they approach each chapter? And of course, retirement is a major transition. And but we have career transitions all during our lives. And, it's no longer just something that you think about financially. It's what if I'm going to be spending the next 15, 20, 25 years in retirement, what does that actually look like for me? And I think the opportunity to start thinking about that either before or during or even into retirement, it's really a good time to be doing it. And it's so many people tend to think that when you're retired, you are separated from the herd, you put out there on an island, and you have no value. And so many people I work with tend to think about how does this really look for me? And how do I create that thing that I really want to have for another 10, 15 years? And it's a big decision, it's a big challenge, but I'm really sort of happy and excited about helping people navigate that whole process. And there are various stages of retirement. There's
Mm.
pre-retirement, there is the retirement party, there is the all kinds of things that happen around that. And so, yeah.
What's a pre-retirement? So I'm curious about a retirement party and
Yeah.
then the pre-retirement. Let's talk a little
Yeah,
bit
yeah,
about that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's that time leading up to retirement. Like, let's just say you're in your 40s or your 50s, and you've got 10, 15 years into your job, 5, 10 years away from retirement, and you start thinking, okay, I am expecting to retire at 65 or at, 67, 68. And how do I start think what are the things I need to be doing now leading up to a plan around that?
Hmm. And then, so what do you see as like, do you see, I wonder if there's been a trend because of everything that's happening also just in the job market and the uncertainty of it. At least this is kind of what I've seen in the market over the last few years is I remember when, like looking at just like my parents and even, my grandparents before they passed away, it was like a guaranteed thing. Like you do this thing, you're gonna get retirement, and then you just spend your time doing whatever it is that you want to do.
Mhm.
You clock in at that 65 and you're like, I'm good. I don't have to worry about anything. I can just
Right.
enjoy and live my life. And then as we're kind of transitioning into this new way, the way that we work with technology, with AI, with a lot of other things, and we're living longer, right? So whatever
Mhm.
you planned for, in your 40s and 50s for your retirement, by the time you get to retirement age, that might not be enough, and the standard of living is going up. So there's a lot of different factors that are moving really fast that it's
Mhm.
almost like scary to think about. Like, I mean, personally, I don't think about retirement in the sense of a traditional retirement. I think I will work
Right.
for until the last day I'm on my deathbed because I love what I
Yeah.
do, and I
Yeah.
and so on, right? Ask me again in 5 years, that might change, but right now, with the energy I have today, I think I'm gonna keep going for a while because I have a lot of hobbies as well. So,
Well,
but I'm
well,
just,
let me just point out something. A, a recent research kind of showed that 60%, 66% of baby boomers
mm,
plan to or are already working past age 65, and they don't have any intention on retiring. They love what they do. They bring a lot of value to their lives and to the community and to work. And they expect to be remaining in the workforce, in the traditional workforce, for 10, 15 more years. So we all aggregate all of these skills and talents and passions, and um, the traditional way of thinking of retirement at, let's just use the 65 benchmark, um, just doesn't exist anymore. I mean, there's gig work, there's part-time work,
mm,
there's consulting, there are all of these different ways to continue redefining yourself as you go on, if
mm,
that's what you want to do. If what you want to do is something different, like travel the world or spend more time with your family, that's the opportunity, presuming that you've prepared yourself financially, that's the opportunity to do those things. But I think the most important thing is, what is your intention?
mm,
What is the thing that you really want to create, no matter how that looks, and start thinking about it, planning it, and then having a plan to execute it,
mm,
and also knowing that it's going to change. 5 years into retirement, I'm just saying retirement, but 5 years into that next chapter, you may see something very different. Somebody may call you to be a consultant when you've actually been home, hanging out with the kids, whatever those things are.
mm. I'm curious in your work as well, because I we typically hear from people who really enjoy what they're doing, right? Like for
Mhm.
people who it's not just a job for them, it's more of just like their values are very much aligned with what they're doing and so on. They don't really talk
and
about
and
it.
and their identity.
Yeah, exactly. Like they
Mhm.
feel like they're in this place that they really kind of find themselves and so on. And so you don't hear a lot of these people talk about retirement, at least not in the traditional in any type of way. They're like, no, like this is just like you're saying, the next phase of my life.
Mhm.
Do you see like a shift between people who genuinely just don't like what they're doing and listen, like I'm just trying to clock in that those number of years, hit retirement and be on my way out because they've spent 20 years being essentially drained because they didn't like what they were doing, but not everybody has the privilege or lucky enough to find the career that drives them, so I realize it doesn't happen for everybody, and it's just part of life. It's the reality, and it is what it is. So do you think that has something to do with it, and how much, I guess, focus should we maybe spend on helping people in their pre-retirement years
Mhm.
maybe look around how they can enjoy what they do more, so they don't look at it as like, I need to get out, I need to retire and get away from this, versus like just making a smoother transition into this
Yeah.
other part of life?
Yeah, I think it's really important for people to be really thinking about and working on what is their next chapter, because sometimes, increasingly often, it's not in their control.
Mm,
The work environment is not in their control. I mean, we see this particularly in the DMV. We see this all the time, that people expect to be working for another 10 years, and all of a sudden that rug is pulled from under them. And so starting to think early on about what does a world of not being a traditional full-time worker, what does that look like for me? And starting to do the kind of preparation that's really involved in being in charge of your own life. And I think that's just a really important manifested step forward for them. And it gives them peace of mind, to know that I have a plan. I'm not defined by this kind of thing, this kind of environment, even though it brings me a lot of pressure, brings me a lot of joy. It doesn't define me.
mm.
I am creating the life that I want, and I'm very intentional about, and I keep using the word intention because it's a word that's often missing when people think about retirement. But what is the intention that I have around what is that lifestyle that I want to embark upon?
Mm. What about people who just don't know where to start? Or, if they see it as just, it's such a big question and it's scary, like where do they start?
Well, there's this growing field of retirement coaching. And I'm really happy that I'm on the tip of the spear, because people are just starting to think about it and talk about it. But find yourself a good retirement coach.
Mm.
And even though you don't really want to be thinking about the word retirement, I think about it in terms of next chapter. And have a conversation with somebody like me, and have that person really start jogging your thinking about how you want to manage the rest of your life.
Yeah, I
That's
think
a
that.
that's an excellent start. And so many times, HR offices, unions, other kinds of organizations don't really think about that part of it. They think about the financial planning for retirement, but they don't think about creating the lifestyle that people want to have. And this is, we all go through many sort of transitions in our lives. And this probably is one of the most important ones. And you don't have to wait until you're in your 60s to think about it.
I think that's an excellent point from that organizational perspective, because a lot of organizations do have the kind of the outplacement services, right? Like, so if the
Hmm.
people are being laid off, but to your point, then they have the financial planning for like retirement, but they don't have that other piece, which I think is so important because for an organization, I think also if you do it well, sometimes you're not ready to let that person retire. Like, obviously they're going to retire, but sometimes as an organization, you're not really ready to, you don't want to lose that talent, right? And all that
Yes.
institutional knowledge. And if you had, somebody like yourself or, others who work within this space and being able to provide this service where potentially this person could actually still be with you on some kind of freelance or consultancy basis, that you
Mhm.
don't have to replace that role, but it could look very different and it could be a win-win for both sides. But if you're not
Uh,
thinking about it, I mean, again, I mean, obviously maybe people like, listen, Elena, like I just want to retire, I don't want to consult for my company anymore, but I'm just saying, like, looking at the
yeah,
bigger picture, that
yeah,
could be
but if you think
interesting.
about it from yeah, but if you think about it from the organization's point of view, um, there's so many benefits to put in place retirement planning, retirement lifestyle planning for those folks who have been there for a while. You create succession planning,
Hmm.
so people are starting to think 3 years down the road, how can I start mentoring other employees to replace me when that time comes? HR offices, they don't really want to lose talent, so severely. So as you're saying, how can I bring a person on and give them a 6 month, a 1 year contract to continue doing work for us where they're not necessarily on the benefits, the fringe benefits payroll? So there are
Yeah.
all kinds of ways for organizations. And just think, if you start working for an organization and you know that that organization is thinking about your well-being for the life of the time that you're there, that's just a huge brand hit a huge brand benefit for that organization. You know that when you come in, that they're going to be taking care of you in the sense that they're thinking about you as the whole person, not just the person who's coming in and clocking in every day.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And another thing is, to add to that brand, the people that are leaving your organization to go in retirement, they also, in a way, become your ambassadors. And
Absolutely.
how many stories do you hear of people who have spent 15, 20 years with a company and they gave them like a cupcake and they're like, good job,
Right,
thanks so much, see you later.
right,
And it was
right.
like, and it's such a soul crushing thing because you
Sure.
like, you've devoted your time and loyalty and certainly, sure, it's a transaction, business is business, but at the same time, to your point, like, where's the human element and how much value it can bring not only to the organization, to the individual, but also to the organization and the brand building and the reputation, which is becoming more and
Yes,
more important. I
yes,
feel in today's day and age, branding is everything. It's
yes.
too easy. Everything is online. Like everything's
Yeah,
transparent, or most things at
yeah.
least. And I think it could really, hurt that relationship, hurt that ambassadorship, for those individuals. So it makes sense. I wonder if any
Yeah,
companies
yeah,
are doing that already.
and there are some companies that are doing it. But just imagine if you're an organization and you want to have a competitive advantage
Mm-hmm.
to your other organizations where your top potential recruits are looking around. Just imagine that one of the benefits you can offer that person is the organizational view that they are a whole person. That is such a powerful piece of your brand identity. And whether you recruit that person or not, that person is going to be out there saying, "Hey, I had a conversation with the recruiter at X agency, and we spent a lot of time talking about who I am as a person."
Mm-hmm.
And that's such a strong, strong kind of conversation. And sometimes it can be the competitive advantage. So,
Yeah.
lots of organizations are thinking about wellness. They're thinking about employee assistance programming, as it's been around for quite a while. But they're thinking now about what other wellness issues should we be thinking about for our team. There's executive coaching. There are all of these different kinds of types of coaching, but thinking about the whole person, the whole employee, and creating a satisfactory and inviting, supportive environment is really important. And I think that sometimes that can be the competitive advantage for bringing in and nurturing top talent.
Yeah, and I mean, realistically, so many companies are just wasting a lot of money on EAP programs that nobody's
Yep,
using and nobody's
yep,
utilizing. And I think
yeah.
I think one thing I encourage people to think about who are listening to this, again, whether in HR, L&D, or an individual in that company, just looking at you know auditing where the money goes right now and where
Mhm.
could it potentially go, because we know that baby boomers are definitely a huge population that's already on the either retiring or on the way to retiring and so on. So a lot of
Mhm.
companies could benefit by providing this benefit to them. And
I,
and I think, yeah.
I, I think you're absolutely right. I saw a statistic from, I think, the Alliance for Lifetime Income. So these are financial planners.
Hmm.
And they say that 2025 will see the greatest surge of Americans turning 65.
Wow.
11,500 people have turned 65 just today.
Wow.
So, how do you nurture, support that kind of talent that's in your current workplace? And it
Mm.
doesn't matter whether you are the CEO or if you're the person in the mailroom. If you have a top to bottom philosophy on supporting people in their whole lives, in their whole life, cycle, that's just a very, very strong statement that you can make as an organization. In
Yeah.
addition to getting the actual work done.
Mm. Yeah, those are wild numbers. I wonder, do
Yeah,
you have
I
any
know it's crazy.
it's crazy. There's just, I mean, I know that there's a big kind of opportunity for a lot of baby boomers that own businesses, like small businesses, right? Like there's just a lot of them that don't, but so I know a little bit about that side of things, but
Mhm.
in terms of organizations, yeah, it'd be interesting to know how many are working. I wonder, do you have any stats on how many are working in organizations today that are like, 65 plus and thinking about retirement? Like, I mean, if there's 11,000 that turned X number of years today or 65 today, I wonder how many of them are still working. Like, is that in there? I
Yeah.
wonder if we can look that up
Yeah,
really quickly.
I don't know. Let me just check on, see if
Yeah,
I've got
let's
any
look it up. I'm
research
kind of
that I can pull
curious.
up.
Let's ask
Um,
ChatGPT. I'll look that up. Corporate America. All right, let's see. I'm asking ChatGPT for people who are listening. Give us a second.
all right.
And Millree is looking up another. Let's see. I said, how many
Yes.
people 65 plus work in a corporate America right now? All right. As of 2025, approximately 11.2 million Americans aged 65 or older remain active in the workforce, with many of those employed in corporate and professional sectors.
Isn't
Wow,
that something?
that is something. And a lot of these people are in that management roles. Um, and it also says, I mean, because ChatGPT just elaborates on everything, it also says that there's been an increase of employees age 65 and older since 2019 that are continuing to work, to your point
Continuing to
earlier,
work.
right? Like they're
Yes.
continuing to work,
Yes.
because, yeah, it's just looking very different these days. That's interesting. So, I mean, that's a huge opportunity for this area, the
Yeah.
coaching, right? And also, I mean, that's a lot of people that are working in organizations today that could, again,
I,
either be your best ambassador or,
yes. And
be.
Elena, I see that there are all of these really critical, important data points that are sitting right, they're sort of hiding in plain sight right in front of us. And I just think organizations, benefits people, HR folks, employees are just starting to think, what does this really mean for me? Organizationally, what do these numbers really mean for me? How many people are in my organization who are 50 plus, and how can we best serve them? And it's not just, again, it's not just about finances, it's about all of these other things that are whole person issues. And
Mm.
yeah, I just think that the numbers are just sitting right there in front of us. And, you know, organizations, as they try to get a competitive advantage, are starting to look more and more at them. And
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I think, I haven't heard that much talk about it, but I think it is a very important conversation to have. I wouldn't be surprised if there's more and more comes out of it in the years to come. But I think, yeah, again, there's a lot of talk about the baby boomers retiring from businesses, like owning small businesses, and there's not a lot of
right,
people to take over those businesses. There's a lot of talk about
right,
that. But
right.
in corporates, it's not a topic, I thought about until, you and I had a conversation. I was like, this is super interesting.
Yeah, it's really funny. As people think about getting ready for retirement, whether they're in their 50s or their 60s, there is some data out there. 69% of retirees said that they wish they had better prepared emotionally for retirement, not
Mm.
just financially. 1 in 3 retirees report feeling a loss of purpose shortly after retirement because they'd not thought about it and planned on it.
Right.
Here's another one. Only 24% of workers aged 50 plus have a non-financial retirement plan.
Hmm. And I think it's even more important. I mean, it's like finances is one thing, but I feel like,
Yeah.
we spend a lot of time on that. Most people do, right? But this emotional piece to me, it's very personal because, I have parents that are in retirement age, and I see how much they need me and how much I
Hmm.
find myself prioritizing time to spend with them and finding
Hmm.
ways to engage with them and to just to engage them in my life and not forget like that they're right there, and I see how much they need me And I feel for
Yeah.
all the other people that are out there that might not have their, family nearby. I'm lucky to have I mean, my mom, my stepdad are nearby. My dad is not. He's in a different country. But I also
Hmm.
like, I worry about it all the time.
Yeah.
Like when I'm going to see my dad, how can I make plans for that?
Yeah.
And I think that emotional piece is so important. And, it's heartbreaking to see how you live your whole life, and this is more of just me being, soft and emotional about this topic, but
Hmm.
you live your whole life and just to find yourself often alone, um,
Hmm.
having devoted so much time to your work
Hmm.
and forgetting to give yourself, or intentionally think about what's next for you. And I think it's a little bit heartbreaking. And I think that, thank you for bringing this up to this conversation today, because I think it's so important. And I think I really hope
Yeah.
people, if they have parents or whoever is listening to this, are like, hey, mom, dad, how are you,
Yeah.
doing this? You should talk to
Yes,
Millree,
right, right.
you know?
And especially if you think about women who tend to be in retirement longer than men, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all of those kind of sometimes they've been traditionally caregivers. And so how does that redefine them? But
Yeah.
the other thing I just want to make sure that we talk about and think about is we tend to think about people who are professionals who are retiring. What about the non-professionals? What about the mail carrier who has been
Yeah.
delivering mail in my neighborhood for 20 years, who now is thinking, okay, now's the time for me to leave.
Mm-hmm.
What is that person going to be doing? What about the person who is, um, has been an administrative assistant for 20, 25 years? That person, they've gotten into their organizational retirement plans, but how do they now redefine themselves?
Mm-hmm.
A woman or a guy who has been delivering mail for 20 years, maybe they're thinking, okay, I'm really tired of doing that, but what's next for me?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is it just hanging around with the family and the kids, or am I going to get overbooked, because I've got free time? How do I
Yeah.
sort of manage that?
Yeah, yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah,
It's all good stuff, and I really hope there's more discussion around that.
yeah.
Um, so, what
Well,
else?
I hope to be a
Mm,
part of that discussion.
yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. What are some things that you think are, and anything else important for us to mention on this topic, or that you want people to know about this topic before we wrap up?
Well, I just think people, in general, no matter where they are in their lives, they should really be thinking about how they want to live the life they want to live prior to and after retirement. And it's never too soon to start thinking about what that next chapter is. I mean, I said a little bit earlier that I view this as a novel, that our lives are like novels. And every novel, has a series of chapters,
Yeah.
and each chapter can be very different from the one that preceded it. And sometimes when you look back, there's a narrative that's been going on. And so don't think that retirement is the end of a chapter. It's the beginning of a new one. And it's really important. I remember you remember the Carole King? She had this song called So Far Away.
Maybe
Remember?
I'd have to hear it.
Yeah. um, well, one of the pieces in that lyric was, I sure hope the road don't come to own me. There's so many dreams I've yet to find. And that really resonated with me as a youngster, and for some reason, and it continues to it comes up every few weeks in my life where I just think, is the road owning me, or am I really looking at new adventures for myself? And I am one of nine siblings,
Wow.
and all of my siblings are retired, and some are doing it very, very well. They were very thoughtful about what they wanted to do, and others of my siblings stumbled into it, and they sort of got pulled into retirement. And so I look in my family, I look in my circle of friends, I look in my amongst my colleagues, and it's just one of those things that it just has drawn me to this idea of thinking about creating intentionally that next chapter in your life and
Mm.
make it one that's really happy, fulfilling, exciting, and meaningful.
Mm. And where can people get in touch with you?
They can reach me at Willicott Consulting and Coaching. I'm on LinkedIn. They can also reach me at directly in my email at millree@willicott.com.
Nice. I'll make sure to include that in the show notes as always as well.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. It's
Yeah.
been a pleasure to talk about this. This is an important topic. I hope to see a lot more on this topic. And
Mhm.
yeah, and thank you for kind of being in this space. I think it's very much needed.
Well, I really am enjoying the space, but I also enjoy chatting with you, Elena. So thank
Likewise.
you for having
Always
me.
a pleasure.